Hello everyone, welcome back to Alkaline Hydroxide 784. This is the third time I'm recording the starting, but okay, never mind. After the mess of an episode, last episode was, I realized how many slip-ups I made while uploading the video. I didn't even put the timings in properly and I did put it in the subtitles instead. Yeah, uh, well, I do really want to get back to the usual program. Yes? Oh, well, apparently my script decided to tell me that it's not entirely the usual program. So, like the previous episode, this episode's script originally came from the non-GPO videos document, and technically this will still be like a GPO episode. Only thing there'll be this extra thing at the end, which is a bit more personal opinion section. So if you don't want to see the GPO part, you can watch the intro and then go to that section. Or if you don't want to see the personal opinion section, then just stop once the GPO part is over. Yeah. I don't know how to get the timings thing to work because I realized it doesn't actually work. I thought it was supposed to work. Never mind, I'll figure it out. So for now, let's roll the intro. Right, so we already know from the previous episode that one, I like to watch Korean shows. In fact, I might say I watch an embarrassing amount of it, if not for the fact that my mother watches even more than I do. Two, I do not really know Korean despite watching so many shows. And I think you know the reason why if you bothered to watch my entire GPO episode. If you don't, was because I am very good at reading English subtitles and actually any subtitles for that matter. As long as I understand it, I can read it. Okay, I accidentally hit the computer. Anyways, so just I'm no better at the language than someone who read one of those tourist vocabulary lists and then forgot about it. So does that make me a fool? Well, I wouldn't think so because I can do maths very well and I have other things that I'm good at. And I think everyone definitely has something that they're good at, right? And in fact, even with regards to language itself, I apparently know three languages, and some of you might think I'm good at language. Although, if you've seen last week's episode, maybe not. I don't know, that's your opinion. But alas, the exact sort of situation where, someone is considered dumb just because they don't know one particular thing happens a lot in Korean variety shows. I think you've seen it. Of course, it in reality is all fun and games. It's not like they actually think that person is dumb or they're not gonna continue it outside that particular episode. And it's meant as entertainment for us sadistic people, but it does happen. The only difference is whereas I'm using language as an example, they tend to use stuff like maybe doing maths. Although to be honest, I'm quite surprised at how bad they are at maths sometimes. Or like things like answering history questions or things like that. Yeah. So the thing is, when I watch the shows sometimes, and then I see that they have to answer some very like obscure history question. I realize that well, I probably can't do that either. Even though I studied H2 history, even in terms of that particular range of history, I probably won't remember all the details. Like I will know the overall storyline, but I don't remember the exact year or the exact date sometimes. Yeah, so that's pretty remarkable for those who can actually answer it. They have some great memory. But anyway, the point is, we see that different people will be extraordinary in certain cases and completely like the opposite of extraordinary in other cases. And even if you don't consider like the typical stuff like answering questions or solving escape rooms or things like that, sometimes some of them are actually clever in other ways. Like if they're a spy, or like the games will have one person who has a separate hidden mission. And if they somehow do it really well and they outsmart the other people, that's also being smart in a way. So we get to see how people are clever in different ways, even though they generally joke about not being clever. Anyways, this brings up the question, is intelligence what we think it is? Yes, so this episode is about intelligence, if you haven't realized that yet. So, what is intelligence? Surely we've figured that out. Or is intelligence more than it appears to be? Well, normally what we perceive intelligence as, well, is perceived by many of us to equal stuff like acing the exams or knowing fancy science terms or other knowledge or terms about a specific topic. We generally see those who have PhDs or those who study difficult majors like medicine or law as the intelligent people. Another way people might see intelligence is in the form of IQ. Like if you know the IQ test that you see online, which I'm pretty sure is completely unreliable, but still you do it because you can get that really nice high number and pretend to be smart. Yeah, okay. You know those. And you may also have heard of a real life IQ test kind of thing. There's this thing called Mensa, which is a club for the uber IQ people. By the way, if you've ever thought of getting into it, apparently you have to take a test and then they use that to determine it, which I just explained. I don't know why I repeated it. Okay, you get the point. So stuff like this exists. And even for stuff like DSA, like last time when I was doing DSA for RGS, they used some sort of thing that looked like an IQ test. I don't remember what's the actual thing called, but they had something like that. And to be honest, the rest of it was quite fun as well. Like we did some very interesting things in the science lab. It was quite fun, but in the end, I didn't really get in through DSA. I went in through PSLE, so um, interesting. Okay, if you're interested in that, I probably I can do that in a different video. But as with everything else, there is definitely more to intelligence. Even PhDs or doctors or lawyers can sometimes seem very, very dumb in, in very specific or certain contexts or situations. Or maybe if like they're the kind who are only book smart, but they end up being maybe they don't have empathy or something like that. There could be some people who are like that. And that would maybe make them not seem as great as you hope they would be. And high IQ doesn't automatically mean you will be successful or the best one around town. In fact, actually, one of the shows that I have watched, which is called The Genius, everyone there is actually quite smart because it's meant for that, meant for smart people. But it's not like everyone there is in Mensa or everyone there does, majors in very high level stuff. The people who end up winning are not like the ones who come from Mensa, but those who have the best like social strategies, plus wits, and also being able to take advantage of the game, which is telling something. Not just being clever in a academic sense or in a logical sense, but you also need to be clever in the social sense, like street smart. So what's up with this? Well, I'm gonna uncover for you what intelligence can comprise. So, from like 1983, um, there's this theory of 8 types of intelligence, which is devised by this guy called Gardner. And you might ask whether it is actually intelligent to just spout this out and decide to follow it without any question. Well, unfortunately, I'm not a psychology expert. Just doing one episode on psychology does not make me a psychology expert, so I don't know. But at the same time, I'm gonna give it the benefit of doubt, and I think it seems okay to follow it because I personally agree with the fact that intelligence is not just one thing. And if you think about it, it's not really like you definitely have to follow it like there's precisely 8 types of intelligence. It is more of just a simple way for us noobs to actually understand how to categorize intelligence rather than a surefire border drawing on the map of intelligence. If you understood that part, then great. So let's go through them quickly. Right, so the first one is spatial intelligence. This is, well, the ability to think abstractly and in multiple dimensions, according to the source. So it's like how well you perceive your space. Like to be honest, the phrasing that they gave sounds a bit like a oxymoron because it says thinking abstractly and in multiple dimensions. To me, actually, I find it hard to visualize certain things in 3D, but I can think abstractly quite. I can think things. It's easier for me to understand certain things when you make it you're more abstract than they already are, which is weird, but okay. So it is kind of a bit of oxymoron to me. But anyways, if you want to take it literally, it's trying to understand the space part of space time, like the area around you, how you would perceive something that is moving through the space or something that is further away from you versus nearer to you, things like that. It's kind of artistic in a way, or maybe might be useful for certain sports where things are moving through the air. Yeah, stuff like that. Of course, there's a limit to this intelligence as well, because humans are 3D beings and we can see in 4D, and that's why you need abstract stuff to understand 4D stuff. And the existence, I mean, in terms of understanding abstract stuff, the limit is what terms we actually have to express the abstract stuff, which in other words is just maths. It's to say what terms we actually have for expressing confusing things. So that's the first one. The second one is called Bodily Kinesthetic Intelligence, which is the ability to use your body in a way to do certain cool stuff, like making that winning move in a game and executing intricate dance moves or stuff like that. Well, given that I'm quite a clumsy mess, yeah, I'm being very serious here. I'm not very good at this. I don't really have that much of this particular kind of intelligence. And honestly, I don't really care. But okay. But if you do have it, then good for you. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's basically how well you can manipulate your body to do certain things. That's basically what bodily kinesthetic intelligence is. So the third thing is called musical intelligence. Uh, I think it's pretty obvious. Music is the ability to sense the rhythm or the flowy tune or other things that you consider musical terminology, because I'm not sure if everyone really understands musical terminology. I mean, the stuff like pitch, tom. Wait, how do you pronounce that? Okay, never mind. All that stuff. I probably don't remember the meanings of all of them either, so whatever. But I surely still I do enjoy music a lot, and maybe more than music itself, I do have a bit of a rhythmic sense. So yes, I guess the reason why I can still survive hall dance despite not being very good at the bodily kinesthetic part is because I still have some rhythmic sense. Okay, never mind, let's move on. Next one is linguistic intelligence. Whatever I attempted to demonstrate but failed at demonstrating last episode. Basically, if you have a way with words or even entire languages, you got this. No comments on my end. Yeah, it's basically how well you are at learning and manipulating languages. Like how maybe if you're creative, if you can write poetry with your like different languages or stuff like that, you probably have some amount of linguistic intelligence. So the next one is called logical mathematical intelligence, which I'm pretty sure is the one I like the most because there's logic, there's maths, connections between things. That's totally the thing I like. Given that I like maths and Python and argumentative stuff, like seriously, why am I doing a GP overview series without getting tired of it? Yeah, literally. I have probably more confidence in this particular thing compared to all the other stuff. So yeah. And I think this is also the thing that people usually associate with being smart, like how well you do maths and science. Although that itself is a bit of a flawed way of looking at intelligence, because maths and science are not the only subjects. There is English, there is history, there's geography, like all the human subjects and all the languages, and also arts, like there's actual art subjects. And actually even science itself doesn't involve it's not just purely logic and maths. There's other aspects to it. You need to be able to visualize certain things in science, like especially in biology. It's easier to understand biology when you can see the image of what you're looking at. So even science itself is not completely logical mathematical. It's also stuff like spatial, or I don't know. Basically, I don't think it's really written here as an actual thing, but more of the artistic some of the artistic side of things as well. So yeah, it's complicated. And the next one is interpersonal intelligence, which is your sense of empathy or your EQ, that kind of thing. If you heard of the IQ, you probably also heard of the EQ. So how well you can understand and relate to others. Well, being a very weird person, I probably don't have the highest amount of EQ, but I think I have enough to understand some people. But sometimes I really cannot understand why people like why do people like bubble tea and stuff. I really don't get it. But I can understand things like why you have, maybe if you have trouble choosing your major, or if you have certain like what kind of problems you face when you go through your education system. That kind of stuff I can understand because it is the education system. And sometimes, when I see certain scenarios happen in a Korean variety show, I can actually relate to it. I can understand them to some extent, like whatever they're feeling at the moment or things like that. So okay, yeah, but I guess you can probably evaluate your own interpersonal intelligence on your own. So next one is a bit different. It's called intrapersonal intelligence, which is, instead of understanding other people, it's not as interpersonal, right? Intrapersonal is understanding yourself. So this is actually quite important. I feel like this is a very important thing. It's something that all teenagers tend to struggle with, especially after their O levels and A levels. They're like, oh no, what do I want to do next? What are the subjects I want to do? That kind of thing. And yes, it is an important thing to think about and make sure you're clear with before you move on. And I kind of feel a bit lucky to actually understand myself decently well. Like, I do know myself pretty well at certain points. In certain cases, like, I know what major I want to do, I know what I want to do in the future, that kind of thing. And I feel lucky for being able to do that. And it does help make your life a little bit better. You have one less thing to get stressed out over. And sometimes, like, I know that my personality or my thoughts tend to change a little bit over time, every year. And I also know that, like, I can also sense it when it happens. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing that, it'd be good to develop as much as it can. So do try to, I don't know, if you feel like you need this, then just have some self-reflection or something. I don't know. So the next one, which is actually the last one, which is naturalistic intelligence, which is how well you know nature. I guess many of us lack this because, one, COVID, two, we are already cooped up in our HDB blocks and schools and every other indoor location that we've been in, because our life is literally revolved around studying and stuff. And because we keep trying to improve our logical mathematical intelligence to do well for GP and for maths and stuff. But yeah, it's a thing that exists, and there are people who do know nature very well. And I think some of them have been featured in Straits Times, like the guy who knows about ants, I think. Yeah, I think I've seen that before. Okay, cool. So that's naturalistic intelligence. And that is the 8 kinds of intelligence that were proposed by Gardner. So from this, you would realize that intelligence is definitely not just one thing, but can come in many, many different forms. And this eight is not like a fixed list, as I mentioned earlier. It's not a fixed borders on. They're not fixed borders on a map of intelligence. You could probably add your own category if you feel like it. So, the next time that someone disses you for being dumb, for example, you can just say that you do have a certain kind of intelligence. It's just that it's different. Everyone has different kinds of intelligence in different levels and different ratios and stuff like that. So all, or at least most of us, should have some sort of intelligence. But what about our fellow animals, or plants, or bacteria, or viruses, or fungi? You know what you want. You know what? Let's just get to the point. Well, there's this video that I saw by Crash Course Zoology, which kind of summarizes it up for the animals. So please do watch it if you can. But generally, what we can say is that humans, we humans are a bunch of egoistic beings, and we tend to compare animal intelligence against human intelligence and consider most of them pretty dumb. But the truth is, we also need to see whether a specific intelligence is actually useful for the animal in their living situation and environment and context. You know what I mean, right? So whether it helps them in wherever they're living in, like what they do in the everyday life, in the sense. And you'll soon come to realize that each animal has its own sort of intelligence, and you can't go around comparing apples with oranges. So actually comparing, like using human intelligence as a benchmark for animal intelligence is just plain wrong. I mean, it's not, it's the only thing we got, like that's easy for us to do, but you cannot just accept it as it immediately. We have to consider certain things in mind, like you have to know that, okay, we are looking from it from an anthropomorphic point of view when you are doing it, and don't just come to conclusions immediately. So, here's an example. Let's say you're really good at solving math problems, but you're not a student in a STEM school in Singapore, but instead you're stuck in the middle of an island, and you don't have any survival skills. How is solving math problem gonna help you in that situation? And that's why animals don't really need to know how to solve math problems unless they like to count or something. Maybe then they will need to know how to count and things like that. So, they are probably intelligent in other ways. Like they conserve their resources and their brain power for things that actually matter to them. And you can extend this through all living beings, not just animals, but also plants and bacteria and fungi and stuff like that. So let's say if you look at bacteria, well, we tend to fight them with something called antibiotics, which literally just means anti-bacteria. Like biotics kind of usually refers to bacteria. For virus, you have antiviral. Fungi, you have antifungal. Yeah, stuff like that. Okay, so you send in antibiotics to fight the bacteria, but some bacteria are quite smart. They somehow evade the immune system, and they somehow become antibiotic resistant by evolving in some way. And the survival of the fittest allows that to happen quite easily. And that's why you shouldn't overuse your antibiotics. Yeah, so you do realize how intelligent bacteria are. Or if you want to be more general, you can say like the act of evolution is actually quite intelligent. It lets the things that work, and it doesn't let the things that don't work. But at the same time, it can do some weird things like leave in features that aren't really needed, but at the same time, they don't really harm us. That kind of stuff. I don't know. But anyways, that is bacteria being intelligent. As for viruses, well, we haven't even decided if viruses are alive, so no comments. Anyways, if you want more examples, you can refer to the links. I think I might have provided some in the form of images or just quick text, because I don't really want to give examples directly here. Yeah. So living things, they have their own kinds of intelligence. Like, you can see the examples in the links, or you understand what I want to say, right? You can't really compare that with human intelligence, but they still have their own form of intelligence. What else can we look at? You say AI? Well, we already have a whole episode on AI, which is the very first one, in fact. If you haven't watched that, then what are you doing? You can do that after this, I guess. Well, here we'll ask a different question because I don't think this was explicitly covered in the AI video. Well, this question is that if AI is really intelligence, or is it just intelligence that humans gave to it? Like, is the intelligence possessed by the machine itself, or is it given to it by humans? Well, I think there are certain phases to it, or like certain aspects to it. The underlying framework is definitely created by humans, and the data that we provide the AI with for it to learn from is given by humans as well. But the AI, even though it requires these things to function, once you give it to them, they're basically doing it on their own. They just look at the data, they come to their own conclusions from the data. Sometimes they can be they can be excruciatingly wrong in our eyes, but there is some logic to what they've learned based on the data they've seen. So AIs come to their own conclusion from the data that we have given them, and they end up learning it on their own, which means that they develop their own intelligence. So I would say that, yeah, technically they have their own intelligence. And how you would really want to look at it is, if you want an analogy, it's a bit like how, you need your two parents to create a baby in our stereotypical family. And the parents will teach the baby certain things as it's growing up, but at the end of the day the baby has its own intelligence and it learns its own things. And maybe, I don't know, you go and bump into a wall and then you realize it hurts, you learn from that. So it learns from experiences. Or if you want a more relatable example, well, some uni professors give us like all the slides and the content, but sometimes the students end up having to figure out which information is actually useful and study wisely. Okay, let's just keep it at I never said anything, okay? Yeah. So as you can tell, intelligence is definitely more than you would normally think of. It's not just how well you can do your math exam or your science exam or your GP exam, whatever it is. And that's the end of the GP part of this. That's pretty much all I had to really say. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how you would use it in an essay. I guess you can use the eight types of intelligence as a way to explain intelligence, I guess. Or you can talk a bit about how humans tend to view intelligence in a very anthropomorphic way sometimes. Things like that. I hope it helps you in that sense. But now I'm gonna go through the personal opinion stuff. So if you're only here for GP, then you can, watch something else now. Or if you're here for this part, then this is the part that you gotta keep your ears on. So I'm gonna share a quick take on what all of this means for us as students and young people. Yeah, we are young people, given that, of course, in the terms of the original plan, we are the last people considered for the vaccine. But actually, being in university gives you one benefit, and some of us do get to get vaccines a little bit slightly earlier than the rest of the other young people. Okay, but that's different. Okay, I hope you guys are safe. No worries. Uh, right. So the conclusion that we got from the GPO part of it is that intelligence is not just studying, like being good at exams, or being good at one particular thing. There's many aspects to intelligence, and even animals and machines can have intelligence. I guess even your smartphone might have some intelligence. Huh. Anyways, so what are the consequences of this, or what do we have to think about knowing that this is the case? Well, the first thing is you can look at the current situation here in Singapore, and which I think has been the situation for like ever. And the fact that, students here generally go for STEM stuff, like, they are more into maths and science. We care about being, I don't know, is it number one or like the top 10 in maths and science education and stuff like that. And even if you weren't specifically looking at maths and science, if you look at grades overall, people tend to focus a lot on getting good grades in PSLE. And I think there's this valid reason behind it, because PSLE ends up determining literally like the next at least 4 years of your life. Or if you do very well and get into IB school, then your next 6 years of life are determined. You don't even have to worry about it afterwards. But yeah, at the same time, it feels very pressurizing for the actual kids who have to do the exam when they're 12 years old. Well, I guess I probably was a bit of a. I don't really remember too much of my primary school. I mean, I do remember quite a bit of stuff, but I think I've kind of repressed whatever negative stuff happened to some extent, because it's primary school. But yeah, in primary school, for some reason, I was just this complete, like this person who really likes studying a lot. And I sometimes wonder how I did all the stuff I did in primary school, and I can't really, do the same amount of productive things today. It's uncanny. I wonder. But not everyone really likes studying. Like I like studying a lot, but not everyone is the same. And I feel kind of bad for those who probably were forced to study just because they needed to get into a certain cut-off score, or like in order to enter a school they need to achieve a cut-off score. And even with the new way of classifying the scores, which looks more like O levels, I feel like it's still going to be quite pressurizing for the kids. They still need to achieve that certain score, but at least they won't be too obsessed on the exact number. They probably be more obsessed over getting a certain grade. And I don't think it's gonna really affect the fact that there's still gonna be tuition. There's still going to be parents who are really kiasu, and kids themselves who are maybe a bit kiasu because of their parents making them become kiasu. I don't know. That stuff is still gonna go on. And some people end up becoming end up becoming discouraged by this. I don't know why I cannot say dejected. Okay, yeah, they become they, you know what I mean, yeah. They become discouraged by the system, and they feel bad very early on in life. But at the same time, it's important to note that actually the education system here is, as you know, menacing as it seems, it's also quite flexible. There's lots of different options here and there. Even if you kind of don't do super well in PSLE, you can always catch up later on. They have like all those um like there's a difference. You can do the express subject after doing it in normal for 1 year. Then if you're really good, you can go to express of the same subject while doing a different subject in normal, for example. Things like that. It's very flexible actually. I think it's worth appreciating that many changes have been made to make the system a bit more accommodating for people of all abilities and all um, people, all sorts of different paces of how fast they progress in education wise. And for some people, they may not even require the so-called normal education route. They may want to just do something completely different that's not really covered in our syllabus. Maybe you want to go into sports or into learning a race like an instrument and running an orchestra or something like that. So things like that definitely are very different from what we encounter in school. So if let's say you're one of those people who feel like you don't belong, well then I guess just tell someone who might help you with that, like who can help you realize your actual dreams. And if you happen to be like discouraged by the fact that maybe you're not good at certain subjects, then think of it in a positive sense and look at which subjects you're good at, and then be proud of that. At least like be proud of the stuff that you can do well, and also realize that everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. And you that you shouldn't be discouraged over the fact that you're weak at certain things, because you will be strong at certain things as well. So yeah, that's pretty much the main message. I think it's something that many people might have repeated, but it's worth repeating it many more times, because some people kind of forget that. And yeah, that's basically all I really want to say. So that the main message is, if you feel like discouraged because you're weak at something, don't feel so bad about it. Think about the stuff you're good at. Think about what you actually want to do, whether it aligns with the stuff you're good at, and continue working on those as well. Because like sometimes just sometimes if you're weak at something, it may not actually matter all that much, and it could be a strength in a different sense, a different context. So have confidence in yourself. And I think the last point is, you still have time, because we are all like young people. We still have a lot of time to learn about ourselves, to discover the world. And if you're weak at something, to improve on it in a certain way, or at least to improve on it enough to continue being able to do stuff that we need to do in a particular skill or subject or whatever it is. At the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. Just because you're bad at one subject doesn't mean you're kind of basically just doomed for failure or something. You can still improve on the subject that you're weak at, or you can still, maybe you can just rely on the subjects that you're strong at and use that to bring yourself back up, because in JC you get to choose the subjects you want to do, and even if one subject is bad, if the others are good, you can still get into university without much of an issue. So yeah, it's not the end of the world, hopefully. As far as I can tell, it's not the end of the world. And yeah, we still have time. So, keep the hope up. And I hope this, it seems very cliched and repeated, I hope it does make some of you feel a little bit better about yourself. And good luck, I guess. Right. Yeah, I guess that's about it. I have nothing else to say. Uh, yeah, so in conclusion, why did I say that so weirdly? Okay. In conclusion, basically, intelligence is varied and exists everywhere. And therefore, we shouldn't think that we don't have any. We definitely have some sort of intelligence in some sort of area. You just need to search for it. And it's also something that can be developed over time. So no worries. So yeah, that's the conclusion. I have nothing else to say. I'm literally like repeating myself like 10 times over this whole episode. Yeah, so if you find this episode useful, please press the like button and subscribe. And with that, I would like to say thank you and bye.